Well, first, thank you all for being here tonight. It's really a nice opportunity to really just come out to be with the community, but also to learn from each other. So we are very much open to dialogue and questions, so please feel free to ask of us what you would like to know, sort of either about the writing process and or what it took to get us to this place and this book. So my name is Tara Hall. I am an owner of a Tara Hall Inspired Solutions, which is a training and development company here based in Norwich. And I've been on the writing journey really since about 2018. She Leads is actually my fourth self-published book, but I have 10 publications altogether. Some of those other publications are collaborative book projects, and which is why I really am happy that this one happened here, because this is actually my last one. That's what I say. But this was number 10, and that's special for me. So I really wanted the opportunity to bring some other wonderful, powerful women along the journey with me, and I want to now turn it over to one of my co-authors.
Good evening. My name is Heather Romanski. I am an author, and I am the owner of a coaching business called Chaos Organized. Yes, we'll talk sometime. Yeah. So I was really honored to be asked by Tara to participate in this book. It's kind of interesting that now I love to write, because when I was in high school, it was my least favorite class, and you had to drag me through writing a paper or any of those things. So I'm certain that Mr. Souza is laughing these days. But I'm excited to be here and talk with you all tonight.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gizelle E. Tircuit, and Tara and I actually have been knowing each other since 1996, way back when we were working for the Department of Children and Families. And I was asked, when she asked me to do that, I was really honored, because I'm always in awe when people ask me, and they look at me and go, oh, you know what, I want to include you because you're this person that people watch and they follow. And I'm always thinking like, wow, what an honor for anyone to acknowledge that. So when she asked me, of course, you go back and you think about when you're a young girl. And for me, I grew up in New Orleans, not up here. So, you know, I grew up around powerful Black women who motivated me to be who I am today. So it was an opportunity for me to share, and to share with the community that I'm currently in what it means to be empowered and to be a mentor.
Yeah. So when we all got together as we were starting this journey, and the book being finished, we have today is actually sort of our inaugural conversation, and because we haven't all been together in one room, and as this process has unfolded. But we also have 2 additional panel discussions and conversations happening next week, Tuesday at Mitchell College, and on Wednesday at Connecticut College. So please share the word and invite others out next week. But I think as we were thinking about this conversation tonight, you know, what was, and I'm just going to kind of put it out there, right, because we were talking about this Women's History Month, and the theme being women who advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm just going to put it over here to you all. I'll come to it last, but like, what were your thoughts about, you know, as we were thinking about this discussion tonight and this conversation? What did the theme of this month mean for you?
Well, I think more so now, because what's happening down south in many states, that the DEI departments are being cut away and people are being taken out of their jobs for you know, when you're looking at equity and inclusion and diversity, they're making statements that it doesn't count or it doesn't matter. Yeah. So I think this month, in a way, thankfully, this is happening in a month where we do have voices. And we can talk about what's going on and the importance that people pay attention to what's happening with that. Because they're taking away our voices. They're taking away the right to be equitable, to be included, whether you are a person of color or you are disabled or you are neurodivergent. So it's very important right now that we do recognize that and we talk about it and call them on the carpet for it. Because if you don't, nothing will change.
So for me, my career is in technology, which is predominantly filled with men. So when I started in that field after graduate school, I had an MBA. There were many women in my MBA program, but when I got into the field, I was always one or two women. I was always in a team. There was always just one or two of us, and I can remember on more than one occasion this is before you did video conferencing, right? When you actually went to a conference room and sat around a table, and there would be me and all these men, and instinctually everyone at the table would say, Heather, you're going to take notes, right? Actually, no, I'm not going to take them. I'm not going to take notes today. And I think it's even just little things like that.
Yeah.
And it's important. I was on an account management team, and I never really noticed it. And we went on one of those dinner cruises. We were in Virginia at our corporate office, and they had one of those dinner cruises where they put your group all together and they take your picture as you're getting on the boat, so you'll buy it on the way out.
Yeah.
And this is another one of those things. There were two women on that whole account team, probably 20 of us, and we're looking at the picture. There's two women. And then instinctually, the person who organized the event was a man, and he handed me the pictures and says, can you take care of getting this get this sorted for everyone? So it's just even little things like that, right, that you need to sort of take a step back and kind of pay attention to.
Yeah, I know for me, currently I work for an organization and I'm a full-time trainer, and the primary role I have is a trainer in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my colleague and I, we have a program, it's a 10-month cohort program, and we cover all of the isms that are out there. And in our last program, we covered disability, we talked about classism, we've had classes on sexism as well, ageism, yeah. And it's just very interesting that in where we are today, that there are still these isms there. And there's still this space where women need to exercise their voice even more so, I think, than ever before. And I know that there's some leaders out there in the audience as well who are also in your current workspaces where you might be managing some of those what are technically really just microaggressions that you were just sharing about, where we do have to really exercise our voice and speak up when things are happening, whether they're happening directly to us or they're happening to a colleague, because sometimes we see things happening, but it's also important that we intervene, on behalf of our sisters out here. So for me, when I thought about the theme for this month, I thought it was just well-timed, as you said, Gizelle, about being able to advocate for women's issues, women's rights, and it's not to say bad man kind of thing, but it's basically to raise awareness to say that unfortunately there are still some things that women are still challenged with in terms, especially equity and pay. We're still not paid the full dollar, and that's still an issue. As I shared before, like it's open dialogue, so if you have questions of us, you can feel free to ask questions as well.
And I think the other piece, when you're saying, I know my partner and I, we have a community program that we call Rose City Movement, and you and I, we talked about what's called tone policing. And if you're not familiar with that, because you're talking about the isms, but there are other smaller subcomponents, especially for women of color, Black women. I've experienced that where our tone is misinterpreted as aggression or anger, because we are passionate about what we do, or when we get into something and we're talking about it, and because we know it's misinterpreted. So, aside from all of those other components, there are those sub-pieces that women of color have to also think about and be mindful of, that we're being judged in a certain way because of our tone of voice.
Did you want to say anything?
Well, so I was just going to say, I clearly don't have the color issue, but I am loud. Like by nature, I'm loud. I always joke that I don't actually need the microphone because everyone can hear me. And that same thing is
Yeah.
is interpreted as, you know, bossy or aggressive, or so it's very interesting.
Yeah. And I'll add that when I was thinking about putting this book project together, I was thinking about all of the things that women encounter, especially when they're in leadership positions. Things, as you just talked about, when you're a person of color who's in leadership, whether you're just, in general, women in leadership, like what are some of the challenges or the barriers that we have when we're in that position? And I think back to one of my first experiences when I was promoted as a supervisor, and there was I was telling someone this story the other day. I really had like the rainbow coalition of staff, and it was really a blessing because I had a black male, I had a Hispanic male, I had a white female, I had an Asian assistant, and a white woman. So we really represented all the diversity that we could at that particular time in my division. But over time, there were some things that were starting to happen where the individual was challenged and felt that because I was holding him accountable for his work, that he turned it into a situation where it was I was targeting him. But really the issue at hand was that he had never had a female supervisor of color. And that was really the reality, and he struggled with that. But that was just one of the things that kind of crossed my mind. But as I was saying before about the intention behind the book itself about women in leadership, there are just different things that we experience as women that, and the book really kind of gives, we're just a small representation of the 7 stories that are in here to talk about those different experiences that people have had and or how they navigated leadership spaces. You had a question in the back?
Interesting stuff that you guys are saying, but it seems like as I sit in these things, it starts to be like a beat down. So, as your book is She Leads,
Yeah.
how's your leadership, helping in this book? How's that going to help to change the dynamic? Or as I say, hey, look, get this book because leadership is needed.
Absolutely.
What's either in the book or either you ladies experience that, all right, this is what I experienced, but through my leadership, I was able to kind of change, and here's the positive outcome from that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. For me, when I think about leadership, because actually that was the next place we were going to get into, is sort of what's the definition of leadership? Because we all might have a different definition of that. And for me, it's never been about title. I never looked at leadership as title. I always looked at leadership as what did that person, who was that person as an individual? And what do they bring to the table to get others either on board with their vision and their mission? And how do they just how do they corral people? How do they make them, not make them, but how do they really just get them on board with where they're going? And this book, quite honestly, is an example of that. So when I think about leadership for me, it's what are those things that I bring to the table as an individual? My organization skills, my ability to connect with people. And this project really was about that for me in terms of demonstrating that leadership and what that can look like, not only in your workspace, but outside of your workspace. So for me, the other things about leadership are, like I said before, it's never about title. That's just one component of leadership. And all of you out there lead in some capacity, whether you're leading and managing your home because you got a budget, you got other family members to take care of. So there's other components to leadership that are just not about the title for me.
Yeah, so my leadership journey or evolution was, it took me longer to get there than Tara. So I think when I first was promoted and I was a boss, I really did see myself as a supervisor, and I was here and I had a team here, and it was a very top down. I had some work to do. So I will say now, and actually that's my chapter in the book is all about this whole experience I had in May of 2020 I've got a very small team. at my day job, very small team, and their hours were going to be cut by COVID. And I had started to make that evolution from supervisor to leader and tortured myself in coming up with plans, and so it would be equitable, and people would somebody would have a Friday off, somebody would have like all these things, because I wanted to protect them and I wanted to do the best for them, and I was going to make some sacrifices so they would have less impact because they were losing 10 hours of their salary every week at a very difficult time. And so I called a staff meeting and I sat down and I laid out the plan, and they all looked at me and nobody said anything either way, and off we all went. And then the next day, the poor guy who had only worked for me for 3 months said, do you have a minute? I need to talk to you. And then he said, we don't like your plan. But he said, we have a better one. And so that, for me, that has completely shifted the whole way that I work with my team. I don't even spend any time coming up with an initial plan anymore. We have weekly staff meetings, and I'll say, okay, this is like the problem. Now we have a person on our team who's critically ill and is out on medical leave. And so at our staff meeting, once we knew that, we said, okay, like, we have to fill this work. We have to cover this work. We don't know when he's coming back. What makes sense? How can the 4 of us do that? And so it has really been a huge shift in the way I work with my team. But it was a process.
If I can just add, because you raised something as far as team, and I think for me, my leadership journey actually started back in college. When I thought back, I was like, wow, yeah, this has been a journey, because I found some of my leadership skills early on then. I didn't really know what they were, but over time I was like, okay, this is the start of leadership. But I was the head of our Black student organization, and I realized then, like, okay, it takes skills to kind of lead people, to, plan events, to get people on board with those events, to go advocate for funding for these events. So it started way back for me, but when I got into the workplace, I realized it was just different. I needed to be able to lead a team, but also the biggest part of leadership for me is my self-discovery and my journey of understanding who I am, so that I can make a good impact on those that I work with and the teams that I lead.
Well, for me, it's always been about getting something done. Something needs to get done, go do it. It's not been about standing out front and saying, oh, look at what I did. And no, it's about, look, if something needs to get done in the community or wherever, go do it. Get it done. Find the people who are there, who are saying, hey, let's do this change, do whatever, and do it. Coordinate, talk about it, and get it done. I've never, that's been leadership to me, just getting it done. Because I hate, my brain cannot take waiting on this one to respond or that one to respond. Look, let's just talk, let's get it done. Let's pull our resources together, find out what's needed, and get it done. And that's part of the whole, I think, community resources and me working in the community, is because there's a lot that needs to be done. We need to get together, pull together, and things are done with us as a united group, not individualized, not separated. There's strength in the number. There's strength in the unity. And so pulling people together and just being part of that group helps to get things done and things changed. For me, that's leadership.
Yeah. Yes.
And I appreciate what you just said on that, but you need the leader to be able to pull those people together. You have to have somebody that has to be the leader in order to make sure.
And I'm okay with that.
And, right, that's what I'm saying.
And I'm okay with that.
Leadership is though.
Absolutely, but that's your definition of leadership.
Yeah.
For me, my definition is being a part of that group. Because see, I'm going to affect change. I might not be the spokesperson, but I will be affecting change because I'm a part of that group.
No, I agree. No, I'm agreeing with you, saying that.
Right.
But you have to have somebody that's going to bring that.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. I leave that up to whomever wants to be that figurehead, so. Go for it.
So what's the difference between leadership and supervising? Because you said you went from supervising to leadership. So what's that difference?
So for me, when I was a supervisor, it was very much, this is my plan, this is my way. It was top down. There was not a lot of collaboration. And for me, leadership is not only bringing all the pieces and all the people to the table and having that collaborative back and forth, but also being able to admit that my way wasn't right. In that example that I gave you, right? Like I said, and now, like we joke about that now, I'll say, okay, you guys have told me time and time again that what I, that I was wrong. Like you love to tell me that, and I'll say, okay, like I get what works for me doesn't always work for you three. So what will work for you three? So I think it's that leadership. There's an openness. There's a willingness to consider other opinions. I think from me, the way when I was a supervisor, I knew what was the right way. And that was what we were going to do. And so when I made that jump to being a leader and being more open and collaborative, that really changed my whole career, honestly.
Nice.
So I think what I want to like to at this point, because I know we touched a little bit on it, but it's to really talk specifically about a little bit, because we're not going to tell you everything, about the chapter that you wrote in the book, as well as why did you choose that particular topic to talk about. So
You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't mind. I love it. Okay. So for me, it was about mentoring. As I stated before, I got to New England because my ex-husband was in the Coast Guard. And I came from New Orleans, where I was used to seeing people of color. I had cultural stuff all around me, things going on. And when I got up here, I was just getting into, I had my bachelor's degree, I was just starting my first master's degree, and that was in education. And I realized there weren't a lot of us in southeastern Connecticut, and we lived in Montville. And I would go out substitute teaching. And so when I started substitute teaching, especially in Norwich, I remember going into the middle school, and some of the kids of color were coming up to me and asking me, "What, are you Spanish? Are you black?" And because they had not seen a teacher, not a para, but an actual teacher who was of color. And so my stepping in there, and talking with them, and then going to the different districts and realizing there wasn't representation for those students of color. And for me, I always knew what it meant to have those mentors.
Yeah.
Those women, as I said and alluded to earlier, growing up and seeing, I went to an all-girls high school with black nuns who were the first black order in the United States of America, and then I went to a historically black college and university and saw women with diplomas on their walls and leaders, and just being able to delegate and do it in a way where you felt like you were part of that group. And I knew representation mattered. And so for me, that mentoring and being there, and not only for my kids of color, but also for students who are non-melanated, white students. Because if they hadn't seen someone who looked like me in that position, they would never imagine that. They haven't had, like you said, the gentleman who wasn't used to having a female as a supervisor. I think, Tara, you said that. If they're not used to seeing that, they can't imagine or understand that, hey, people of color can hold these positions. So for me, mentoring and representation, which is my chapter, and talking about my path along the way and how that built who I am today, and being director of health and wellness at Mitchell College presently, as well as I'm teaching a course. Students, especially in higher education, need to see this representation, that we do fulfill these positions, and women of color are out here in higher education.
Yeah.
So I've shared a lot about my chapter with you already, but I will just say, I think one of the things that was most important for me to convey to the reader was that that it's okay to be a vulnerable leader. It's okay to admit that you don't have all the answers. It's okay to admit that what you decided didn't work, and you pivot and you revise and you go at it again. And I think there is a contingent of leaders who think if they admit that they've made a mistake, or that they have made a bad decision, that it makes them weak. And I think that's the farthest thing from the truth. I think, like I said, I think it gave me more credibility with my team, and they respected me more when I sat down with them again and said, okay, your idea actually makes way more sense, and is, after you explained it to me twice and I did the math, it is easier, so let's do it your way. So I think that it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, when I was listening to both of you, when I think about my journey in leadership and my chapter is about connection. And I think the reality is women just lead differently. And because we lead differently, people might experience our leadership differently. And so for me, I just wanted to read a little piece here from my chapter, which says, as a female leader, ask yourself, who is in my circle? What does it take to feel and be powerful? How do I own my transformation? How do I remain hopeful and steadfast in the midst of challenges or fear storms? What resources do I need? How do I lead with authenticity? These are just a few of many introspective questions that can support your voyage. Remember, all roads lead back to how you conduct yourself and what you will do to be the most self-aware leader. When recalling parts of my process to make this book come to reality, consider these strategies that I implemented and consider applying them to your leadership toolkit. 1, identify what it is you desire to do. 2, step out of your comfort zone and take action. 3, assess and reassess if you need to collaborate, which you did, right?
Yep.
Right? 4, create, expand, and utilize your network. Shine your light and shine the light on others who have knowledge, wisdom, and expertise. Maintain a growth mindset and establish a personal growth plan. Pause, breathe, and recalibrate. Because, sister friend, you have all that is needed on the inside to be your best. So when I think about putting this book project together, those were all the things that came to mind for me, because I realized that there were many women that I knew who were in other aspects, higher education, and both of you in higher education in different capacities. But there are many women out there who have a lot of skills, a lot of gifts, and we don't often get in spaces where we can share that with others. So I'm really looking forward to the conversations next week too, at the college to speak with other younger college students as well as the staff as well, because sometimes we can lose our footing and not realize that all the tools that we have, they really are on the inside, and it takes collaboration and talking with others, utilizing their expertise to really kind of get to the place you want to get to. Anything else either of you want to share? Any questions? I kind of want to open it up to any questions that people have.
How do women lead different? You said that. I'm just wondering your thoughts.
Women, in my experience and review, women lead differently because we have, our maternal instincts are different. Well, we have maternal instincts. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there could be some debate on some of that.
That kind of talk.
Yeah, right. But with that being said, we assess things differently because of that instinct. What was that?
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think because of that, we see things differently, and we also approach things differently. Women tend to talk more, okay? We tend to talk more, so sometimes we have to be aware of some of those things that we do just by instinct of who we are, because if we're leading and we have a lot of, maybe the staff that we're leading is male staff or male dominated, we have to remember that they're not going to necessarily sit there and absorb all of what we're saying, because we have so much to say sometimes. So we have to be cognizant of things that we tend to do just naturally that may not go well with our teams all the time. I see some head nods from some of the women, so feel free to chime in if you wish out there. But That's been my experience. And women do tend to collaborate more. Men tend to be a little bit more directive in their approach and their style. Just sort of, this is it, get it done. And we want to talk about it and process things out a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Tara, I agree with you 100%. I think women, we lead with our emotions. I think more so, that's been my experience more than men. And it's not always a good thing.
Right.
I mean, just because it's different, it doesn't necessarily mean it's always good.
Right.
But I agree with you as well about, and I think more than one of you have said it, about the perception though around how we lead is also viewed differently, because we're viewed as aggressive, where a man is viewed as confident.
Yeah.
And so I think people look at us differently. We are different.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the reality of it. However, sometimes I have struggled more with being led by other women.
You want to say a little more about that?
Is
You
that
left-
because how you've
Yeah,
been
you left us on a
cultivated,
cliffhanger, yeah.
Or, the roles that you learned growing up as a female?
I think part of it is women are more relational.
Yes.
Women lead with emotion.
Yep.
And so I think as women, and I'll say we, may have a tougher time sometimes putting those personal feelings aside in whatever work it is. When you said, we just need to get it done. Well, I think women struggle a little bit more with, do you like me? You're on my team, do you like me? So I need to make sure that you and I connect before we can get it done. And I think men, my perception, men will say, we just need to get it done. I could care less. Whether we're friends or whether we're not. And so I think sometimes women, some of the women that I worked for, that I've encountered in leadership roles, have wanted more from me than just my work.
That's interesting.
Well, I can understand that if you try to come to work and be a friend, and I ain't never been about that life. So,
I'm with
and really, it's not, I think for me, it's always been, hey, Dave, you're a good leader. And then I became a good leader when it was like, hey, this is what you're doing. And then I knew the reasons of why. I was doing a whole lot of things naturally. And I hear you guys say emotions. We all have emotions.
Right.
So
Right. It's how you wield that. It's how you wield it or control it.
Yeah.
What you're saying is
Yeah.
real. So I'm just saying, as you guys are saying,
Yeah.
men are, I don't know what you're saying when you say emotions.
But I think-
compare it to
so-
a man. I think we both have emotions.
We do. We have
But-
masculine and feminine,
Different
yes.
emotions come out
Yes.
is what I would say.
Correct.
So, but-
And I would-
because I use the term
Yeah.
emotions, for me, I was talking about my experience where women have, they don't come out and say, I want you to be my friend. They say, are you loyal? So loyalty to them, sometimes, some women, means more than necessarily confidence. And I have found in working for men that they have been more about getting the job done. That's my experience.
And it's the values you bring to your position. Because, I just had a conversation, I was talking with a group in Norwich, and it was a business group, and I said, we do have to consider when you come to work in a group, your values are going to be different from other folks' values. So you have to first know who you are.
Yep.
Because then you can teach people how to treat you. You have boundaries, what you will allow and what you will not allow. So absolutely, we both have masculine and feminine. I think to your point,
Yeah.
as women, we have been placed in those to be that nurturer, so
Yeah.
to speak, because that's been our role.
And will you take the notes? And will you, those,
Right.
and those are some of the
Right.
ways that
You
you'll see
fall
some
into
things
a
playing
role.
out.
Could you get the coffee and can you
Yeah.
bring the brownies?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So I would,
don't
I would,
do it,
I would just
Giselle.
add with that, with the emotion part is how women express express themselves. And I think that's where if we are really passionate about something and it comes off as too emotional for someone's eyes, then it's looked at differently. And I believe you made the point earlier about then that can be seen as someone being weak, that you're really not qualified. You're really not cut out to take this space because you can't take the space, literally, right? So you have to, if you're too soft, then you're weak. If you're firm and direct, you're aggressive. So we, as in women in leadership, have a very fine line to toe at times because of that.
I mean, you can look at history. I'm a Hollywood buff, and so I remember as a little girl hearing about Joan Crawford and Betty Davis and Barbara Streisand and all these women who led these companies, and you know the words that they were referred to as.
Yep.
And it's because they were not used to having women in these positions, so because they weren't used to this, and they were direct and understood how you needed to be a CEO, they were given these names that were not necessarily, it wasn't true,
Yeah.
they were just good leaders. And because it was predominantly male men, you know, it was looked at as, hey, you can't work with them, or they're unapproachable, or this, that, and the other. Yeah, it's the roles that we have to that we've fallen in, and a lot of us do hold those roles. I remember, just quickly, when we had the election, and Hillary was running, and I, as a therapist, I had clients say to me, "I'm not ready for a female president. I don't think she could run the country. Why do you think she cannot run?" So, I mean, it's the roles. It's how we've been portrayed and raised and enculturated. We have to unthink what we've been conditioned to think are the roles we put people in. And that's across all different avenues and people and disabilities and everything.
Yeah. So one of the things that I would just like to add about the book is that when you, if you secure yourself a copy tonight, is to look at when you read each chapter, each author has left lessons learned. I read mine to you, but we really wanted to leave tangible strategies that you can take to implement in whatever capacity it is for you. Like I said, it isn't just leader by title or a leader in a business. It's your life. I mean, because a lot of the things that I think we've all spoken about tonight they're all our personal journeys, but they're also the lessons that we took away from being in all of those respective spaces, right? Because sometimes we wear multiple hats, right? And sometimes those skills or things that we learned from one place, they are transferable to another space. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. Any other questions or comments or thoughts out there?
So what? Well, good. No, I was just going to ask you a question. What inspirational message would you have for a young girl or woman aspiring to be a leader?
Can I start?
A young woman here, and what are we?
Yeah. Start. Go for it.
So I am a mom of 2 teenage daughters, so I think of that a lot. My very first, or if I, one piece of advice, use your voice and keep using it. Even if you don't get the result you were aiming for, keep talking. Keep opening your mouth. Respectfully, kindly, listen, collaboratively, but be vulnerable and take a chance. Because you can sit quietly and nothing is going to happen. The magic is opening your mouth and taking a step, and then revising, taking another step. I'm very fortunate. My mother and my grandmother were really strong leaders. My grandmother, my mom's mom, was a branch manager of a bank in 1978. Women didn't have those kinds of jobs in 1978, and bless her, my grandfather was a very traditional man, and my grandmother would close the bank and go home and make dinner for the family, him and the 4 children, clean up from dinner and go back to the bank and write more mortgages, because in 1978 the branch manager wrote mortgages, right? It was very different. And then my mom was when you could ride an ambulance with a basic first aid card, not all these hours of EMT training and these other things. She was a lifeguard. And so she had that training, and then one day she and her brother came upon an accident where a young woman had been in a car accident and the windshield had broken in her face, and she had glass in her face. Of course, she was very upset. The ambulance arrives, it's 2 men. My mom has made a connection with this woman, so they ask her to go. And then they ask her if she would be interested. Oh, you're around in the summer. Would you like to do this more? She would go on first aid calls. She was not allowed in the firehouse because she was a woman. So she would drive to the firehouse, and she would have to wait for a man to get there to pull the ambulance out so she could get in and then go render first aid to someone. I mean, this was not that long ago. And so, you know, this is my daughter's grandmother. So I think use your voice. If you don't have an example in your family, there are a lot of really good mentors and examples of women who've used their voice, and that is the beginning of your journey.
I think definitely finding a mentor, finding that one person that is connected, that you can connect with, because research does show it takes one person that shows interest in you, who uplifts you, to get you through. Finding your voice, as you said, being confident. I have 1 girl and 4 boys. And the girl's the oldest, and she's a doctor now. And I remember I wasn't very confident when I was a girl growing up. I always preferred to be on the side. I just didn't think but the one thing I wanted was for my daughter not to have that type of view of herself. I wanted her to be confident. You know, we moved up here. I made sure that Janelle was around the Taras and Black women professionals, so she could see who's out there and inspire her. And she's very confident. But you're finding that one person that you can connect with, and take a risk, take a chance, believe in yourself. And you'll get there. Just keep believing yourself and keep fighting and moving forward. It's about forward progress. Taking the lessons you've learned with any failures or any, stumbling that you might do, take those lessons and move that forward with you.
Yeah, thank you. I would agree with all of that. and what I would add in terms of like a message to, and not just for young girls, but for women in general, is to look in the mirror and love who you see. That would be my message. Look in the mirror and love who you see. Society is pretty rough on young girls and women, and it takes a lot for us to make sure that we're okay with who we are. So get in that mirror, say affirmations, speak positively to yourself and about yourself daily. Daily. That's my message. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. So we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.